On December 1st, the HOA locked the only road to my Christmas tree farm while a blizzard trapped my twin sons at school. That gate cost me $40,000 in Christmas tree sales. But watching my boys' faces pressed against a frozen bus window was what made me decide to fight back. Miranda Blackstone had posted those seasonal restrictions without warning and now stood there in designer snow boots with the smuggest smile I'd ever seen. "Should have read the fine print," she called through the chain link as Tyler and Mason were finally released to walk home in the storm. What Miranda didn't know was that the mountain beneath her road had been hollowed out by a county tunnel since 1954, and that gate she used to trap my family? It sat directly above something she had no legal right to block. What would you do if someone used your kids as leverage? My name's Connor McReady, and 3 years ago I thought I'd found paradise in the foothills outside Denver. After losing my father in a mine collapse back in 2018, I used the insurance settlement to buy 300 acres of Colorado wilderness where my wife Sarah and I could start fresh. The property came with 15,000 Christmas trees already planted, and we figured we'd found our slice of the American dream. The ranch sits at the end of Pine Ridge Mountain Road, a winding stretch of asphalt that climbs through granite ridges and pine forests. Beautiful country, but there's only one way in and one way out. When the previous owner sold us the land, he mentioned something about the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association maintaining the road, but assured us we had a permanent agricultural easement. "Been farming this land since 1987, he said, handing over the keys. "Never had a problem." Sarah handles the business side of our operation. She's got a head for numbers and a talent for making our website look like something out of Better Homes and Gardens. During harvest season, she coordinates with customers who drive up from Denver and Colorado Springs, families looking for that perfect Christmas tree experience. Tyler and Mason, our twin boys, they help with everything from hauling trees to operating the cash register. They've got dreams of taking over the farm someday, maybe expanding into year-round nursery operations. Then Miranda Blackstone moved to town. Miranda's the kind of woman who wears designer hiking boots that have never seen actual dirt. She drives a white Mercedes G-Wagon that probably costs more than most people's houses, and she's got that particular brand of confidence that comes from having money and knowing how to use it as a weapon. She bought the biggest house in the development 3 years ago and immediately got herself elected HOA president. Within 6 months, she was modernizing community rules faster than you could say special assessment. Tim, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, I was out checking tree quality when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Brand new signs had appeared overnight along our access road. Seasonal road restrictions, effective December 1st, commercial vehicles prohibited. No advance notice, no board vote that I knew about, just Miranda's signature at the bottom, declaring that heavy trucks would damage the pavement during winter months. I called Sarah immediately. "Honey, you need to see this." She drove up in our pickup, took one look at those signs, and I watched her face go pale. We had $40,000 in Christmas tree pre-orders, families expecting to drive up our road starting December 1st. Our entire year's income depended on the next 4 weeks, and Miranda had just locked us out of our own business. That night, sitting at our kitchen table with past due bills spread between us, Sarah started crying. Not the angry kind of tears, but the exhausted, defeated kind that comes when you realize someone with more power than you has decided to destroy your life for no good reason. The smell of her lavender perfume mixed with the pine resin that's permanently embedded in my hands from handling trees all day. Outside, I could hear the rumble of a distant logging truck making its way down the mountain, a sound that would soon be forbidden on our road. "What are we going to do?" Sarah whispered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my father's old brass compass, the one thing I'd salvaged from his mining gear after the accident. The weight of it in my palm always helped me think clearly, reminded me that some problems require going around instead of going through. "I'm going to do what I do best, honey. I'm going underground." What I didn't tell her that night was how the idea of being trapped underground again made my chest tight with the kind of panic that had haunted me since Dad's accident. But sometimes you've got to face your fears to protect your family. The next HOA meeting was held in the community center, a cedar-sided building that Miranda had somehow convinced everyone needed a $30,000 renovation the year before. I walked in to find about 20 homeowners scattered across folding chairs, and Miranda standing at the front with a PowerPoint presentation already loaded. "Before we address tonight's concerns," she announced, clicking to her first slide, I want to remind everyone about the importance of maintaining community standards and safety protocols. The slide showed photographs of tire tracks on asphalt, deep grooves that looked like they'd been made by heavy machinery. According to Miranda, these were examples of damage caused by my delivery trucks. Connor McCready's commercial operation has been systematically destroying our road infrastructure, she continued, her voice taking on that particular tone politicians use when they're lying with confidence. The tire damage you see here represents thousands of dollars in potential repair costs. I stood up. Those aren't from my trucks, Miranda. My heaviest vehicle is a Ford F-350 and, Mr. McCready, she interrupted, several residents have expressed concerns about your mental state following your mining accident. Perhaps this isn't the time for emotional outbursts. The room went dead silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, measuring, judging. Tyler had mentioned kids at school calling me the crazy miner guy, but hearing it from Miranda in front of our neighbors felt like a punch to the gut. She clicked to the next slide, a proposed $25,000 special assessment for emergency road repairs. Every homeowner would pay, except those who voted to support the seasonal vehicle restrictions. This is extortion, I said. Miranda smiled. This is responsible community management, Mr. McCready. Something you might understand if you had experience running a successful business. I walked out before I said something I'd regret, but not before I heard her announce that the vehicle restrictions would take effect in 2 weeks, just in time to kill my Christmas tree season. The drive home felt longer than usual. Sarah was waiting on the porch, and I could tell from her expression that she'd already heard from customers canceling their orders. 15 families called, she said. Word's getting around town that we might not be accessible during harvest season. We just lost another $15,000 in sales. That night, while Sarah handled the business calls, I spread my father's old mining maps across the kitchen table. The brass compass sat in the center, its needle pointing north toward the ridge behind our house. According to these surveys from the 1950s, there had been significant mining operations throughout this area, including some that extended under what was now the HOA development. I remembered something from my mining law classes. In Colorado, mineral rights often predate surface rights. If someone owned subsurface access before the HOA was established, those rights couldn't just be revoked by a homeowner's covenant. The next morning, I hiked up to the ridge with a metal detector and surveying equipment. What I found made me smile for the first time in weeks. Rusted survey stakes from a 1950s mining operation positioned right along the boundary of Miranda's property. Property records at the county courthouse told an interesting story. The original mining claim extended beneath the entire HOA development, and those subsurface rights had never been transferred or abandoned. According to Colorado mining law, that meant the current owner of the mineral rights, which turned out to be the state after the original company went bankrupt, had legal authority to grant access for legitimate mining operations. But here's the really interesting part. Hidden behind overgrown brush near those old survey stakes, I found the entrance to an abandoned mine shaft. The wooden supports looked solid enough, and my flashlight beam revealed a tunnel that disappeared into the mountain. I touched Dad's compass in my pocket and made a decision that would change everything. Miranda wants to play underground games with a guy who spent 20 years in holes? I muttered to myself as I examined the mine entrance. Rookie mistake, lady. The tunnel was wider than I'd expected, clearly designed for moving heavy equipment. More importantly, according to my calculations, it ran directly under the HOA road system. If I could prove this was part of a legitimate mining claim, I might have found our way around Miranda's blockade. When I got home that evening, Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of cancellation emails. How bad is it? I asked. Bad. But Connor, there's something else. Tyler came home from school with a black eye. Kids are saying you're unstable, that the mine accident affected your brain. The metallic taste of anger filled my mouth, but I forced myself to stay calm. Miranda wasn't just attacking our business anymore. She was going after our family. I sat down across from Sarah and showed her the mining maps. Honey, what would you say if I told you I found a way to get our trucks to the farm without using Miranda's road at all? 3 days later, a white sedan with government plates pulled into our driveway. The woman who got out wore a crisp business suit and carried a clipboard with official letterhead. My chest tightened as I recognized the logo, Colorado Department of Human Services. Mr. McCready, I'm Janet Wilson, Child Protective Services. We've received reports about unsafe working conditions involving minors on your property. I invited her inside, trying to keep my voice steady. What kind of reports? She flipped through her paperwork. Allegations that you're involving your children in dangerous mining activities. Specifically, that you're exploring unstable underground areas and exposing Tyler and Mason to cave-in risks. Sarah appeared in the doorway, and I could see the fear in her eyes. We both knew what this meant. Miranda wasn't just trying to destroy our business anymore. She was coming after our kids. Ms. Wilson spent 2 hours photographing our property, interviewing the boys separately, and documenting what she called potential safety hazards. When she left, she handed me a formal notice requiring the boys to stay with relatives until the investigation was complete. That night, we drove Tyler and Mason to Sarah's sister in Denver. Watching them pack their bags, seeing the confusion and fear in their 14-year-old faces, made something harden inside my chest. "Dad, are we in trouble?" Tyler asked as I loaded his suitcase into the truck. "No, son, but someone's trying to make it look like we are." "Is it because of the mine thing?" Mason added. "Kids at school say you're obsessed with digging holes." I knelt down to their level. "Sometimes adults use rules as weapons. What I'm doing isn't dangerous. I'm trained for this work. But I need you guys to trust me while I fix this problem." After dropping them off, Sarah and I drove home in silence. The house felt enormous without the boys' voices echoing through the rooms. The next morning, I made a decision. If Miranda wanted to call my mining work dangerous, I'd show her what real mining work looked like. I spent the day setting up proper equipment: industrial ventilation fans, LED lighting systems, structural timber for supports. This wasn't going to be some amateur exploration. I was building a permanent tunnel using every safety protocol I'd learned in 20 years underground. The entrance to the old mine shaft was bigger than I'd initially thought. Once I cleared out decades of debris and installed proper ventilation, I could see that this was part of a significant operation. The tunnel extended deep into the mountain, with side passages branching off toward the valley. What really got my attention was a side passage that ran directly toward the HOA development. According to my compass readings and the old mining maps, this tunnel would emerge somewhere near the community center. Then I made a discovery that changed everything. About 200 yards into the main tunnel, I found an intersection with another passage that looked much newer. This section had concrete reinforcement and modern electrical conduits, clearly not from the 1950s operation. Following this passage for another 100 yards, I came to a metal door marked with biohazard symbols. The door was unlocked. Inside, I found an underground chamber filled with industrial barrels, 47 of them to be exact, each labeled with chemical identification codes that made my blood run cold. These weren't mining materials, they were toxic waste containers. I recognized the disposal protocols from my mining safety training. According to federal environmental law, every hazardous waste container requires a detailed manifest documenting its contents, origin, and disposal method. These barrels had no paperwork, no tracking numbers, no legal documentation whatsoever. Someone was using my mine shaft as an illegal toxic waste dump. I spent the next 3 days documenting everything, photographing each barrel, recording serial numbers, testing the chemical contents with portable detection equipment. The results were terrifying. Asbestos fibers, lead paint residue, contaminated soil samples, enough toxic material to poison the groundwater for the entire county. But here's what really made me angry. Fresh tire tracks in the soft earth showed that someone had been making regular trips to this dump site. The tread pattern matched the heavy-duty trucks used by construction companies. I set up motion-activated trail cameras throughout the tunnel system, the kind hunters use to monitor game trails. If someone was still using this place for illegal dumping, I was going to get them on video. The whir of ventilation fans echoed through the tunnels as I worked, mixing with the sound of my own breathing. The smell of damp earth and concrete filled my nostrils, along with the faint chemical odor from those storage barrels. When I emerged from the mine that evening, Sarah was sitting on our porch with her phone in her hands. "Tyler called," she said. "He wants to know when they can come home." I walked over and sat beside her, the gritty feel of rock dust still on my skin. "Soon, honey. Miranda thinks she's buried our family, but what she doesn't know is that some people specialize in digging things up." I should have expected Miranda to escalate things, but even I was surprised when the security patrol started. It began with a single guard in a company truck making rounds through the development twice a day. Within a week, there were 3 guards working 8-hour shifts, patrolling the HOA area around the clock. According to the notice Miranda sent to all residents, this was a temporary security enhancement in response to reports of trespassing and suspicious activity. The guards had one job: watch me. Every time I left my property, they followed at a distance. Every delivery truck that approached our road got stopped and questioned. Sarah couldn't even walk to our mailbox without some guy in a uniform asking for identification. Then Miranda played her trump card. On a Thursday morning, a sheriff's deputy showed up at my door with papers, a restraining order requiring me to stay 500 feet away from any HOA property. "This includes the main road, Mr. McCready," the deputy explained. "You can access your property from the back through county land, but you can't use the front entrance." I looked at the legal document. Miranda's signature was right there at the bottom, along with a sworn statement claiming I'd been stalking residents and making threatening gestures toward community members. "Deputy, the only way to access my property from the back involves a 4-mile hike through wilderness area. What about emergency services, fire trucks, ambulances?" He shrugged. "You'll need to work that out with the county. I'm just serving papers." After he left, I called the fire chief. The conversation didn't go well. "Connor, I sympathize with your situation, but if we can't get our trucks to your property, we can't provide emergency coverage. That's a violation of county fire codes." Sarah was standing in the kitchen when I hung up, her face pale. "What does this mean?" "It means Miranda just made our property legally uninhabitable." That afternoon, I watched Sarah carry groceries from her car parked a mile away, walking uphill through the snow with heavy bags in both hands. The sound of her labored breathing when she finally reached the house made me want to put my fist through a wall. But anger wasn't going to solve this problem. Engineering was. I spent that night reviewing the tunnel maps I'd been developing. The main mine shaft connected to a network of passages that extended throughout the mountain. If my calculations were correct, I could reach any point in the HOA development through the existing underground system. More importantly, I'd been reviewing Colorado mining law, and I'd found something interesting. The original mineral rights for this area had never been formally abandoned. According to state records, the mining claim remained active under federal jurisdiction, which meant anyone with legitimate access to the mineral rights could travel through the tunnel system for reasonable mining purposes. Transportation infrastructure definitely qualified as reasonable mining purposes. I started work on expanding the tunnel system the next morning. This wasn't casual exploration anymore. I was building a permanent transportation route using professional mining techniques: steel support beams, concrete reinforcement, industrial ventilation systems. If Miranda wanted to play legal games, I'd make sure my underground access was completely legitimate and professionally constructed. 3 days into the construction, my trail cameras captured something that made my hands shake with rage. At 2:17 a.m., the motion sensors activated, recording video of 3 trucks entering the mine system through a hidden entrance I hadn't discovered. The trucks belonged to Blackstone Development, Miranda's construction company. Over the next 4 hours, the cameras documented her crew dumping barrel after barrel of toxic waste into the underground chamber. I watched the footage 3 times to make sure I wasn't imagining things. There was Miranda herself, dressed in work clothes and a hard hat, directing her crew as they unloaded unmarked containers. The timestamp showed this was happening while I was legally prohibited from being within 500 feet of HOA property. But here's what really got me. The trucks were accessing the mine through Miranda's own property. She had a hidden entrance on her land, which meant she'd known about the tunnel system all along. I spent the weekend expanding my own tunnel access, creating a direct route from my property to the main underground chamber. The work helped me think clearly, the familiar rhythm of drilling and blasting, bringing back memories of working alongside my father. By Sunday evening, I had proof that Miranda was running an illegal toxic waste disposal operation, video evidence of her crews violating federal environmental laws, and a completely legitimate underground transportation system that bypassed her road restrictions entirely. The smell of fresh concrete and timber supports filled the tunnel as I installed the final section of ventilation ducting. The echo of my footsteps mixed with the hum of industrial fans, creating a symphony of progress. When I emerged that night, I found Sarah sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open. "The boys called," she said. "They want to know when this will be over." I sat down beside her and showed her the tunnel blueprints. "Soon, honey. Miranda's been digging herself into a hole for months. I'm just documenting the depth." The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning when I was following the main tunnel toward what I calculated should be the area beneath Miranda's development. My headlamp illuminated something I hadn't expected. A metal door marked "Office," authorized personnel only. The door was unlocked, probably because whoever built this place never expected anyone to find it through the old mining tunnels. Inside, I discovered what looked like a preserved time capsule from the 1950s. Filing cabinets lined the walls, filled with documents from the original Pine Ridge Mining Company. But it was the modern edition that made my blood boil, a desk covered with recent paperwork bearing Miranda's signature. The geological surveys told a story that explained everything. According to the original mining company reports, the entire area where the HOA development now sits was classified as catastrophically unstable ground. The mine was abandoned in 1954, not because the ore ran out, but because continued excavation had created what the engineers called an active landslide zone waiting for a trigger event. Miranda's luxury development was built directly on top of this geological time bomb. But here's the really damning part. She knew about it. The modern paperwork showed that Miranda had bribed county geologist Dr. Philip Hayes to falsify soil stability reports during the permitting process. There were copies of bank transfers, email exchanges, and even a handwritten note from Dr. Hayes warning Miranda that continued construction on this site will eventually result in catastrophic structural failure. She'd built 37 luxury homes on land that any competent geologist would condemn as unfit for construction. The toxic waste operation was even worse than I'd thought. According to the manifests I found in her desk, Miranda had been accepting illegal waste disposal contracts from construction companies throughout Colorado. Asbestos from hotel demolitions, contaminated soil from old gas stations, lead paint scrapings from historic renovations, all of it dumped into my family's mine shaft for a fee. 47 barrels containing enough toxic material to poison the underground water system that supplied drinking water to over 10,000 people in the valley below. Each barrel represented a federal environmental crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison and $37,500 in fines. Simple math. That's over $1.7 million in EPA violations, not counting the criminal charges. But Miranda's corruption went deeper than environmental crimes. The financial records showed she'd been systematically stealing HOA funds to finance her development projects. Road maintenance fees that were supposed to fix actual potholes had instead paid for bribes, cover-ups, and toxic waste disposal. Special assessments that homeowners thought were going toward community improvements had been diverted to Miranda's personal accounts. $340,000 in stolen homeowner dues over 5 years. The most recent documents revealed her ultimate plan: force out the remaining agricultural properties through road access restrictions, then develop the entire mountain into a luxury ski resort. The toxic waste disposal was just a temporary revenue stream to finance the resort construction. I photographed every document, copied every file, documented every piece of evidence, then I made copies of the copies and stored them in multiple locations. According to the mining law of 1872, mineral rights holders have permanent access to their claims for any reasonable mining purpose. The federal law supersedes all local zoning restrictions, HOA covenants, and restraining orders. Translation: I could legally build an underground transportation system throughout the mountain, and there wasn't a damn thing Miranda could do to stop me. When I climbed out of the tunnel that evening, I called Sarah from the mine entrance. "Honey, remember when you asked what we were going to do about Miranda?" "Yeah." "Well, it turns out Miranda's been doing plenty to herself. I just documented all of it." The next 3 weeks were the most intense of my life since the mine accident. I was building something bigger than just a tunnel. I was constructing a case that would bring down Miranda's entire criminal operation. First, the physical infrastructure. My mining background meant I could build a tunnel system that would last 100 years. Steel I-beams for structural support, poured concrete foundations, industrial ventilation systems that could handle heavy equipment. I wasn't just creating an emergency route. I was building a permanent underground transportation corridor that met all federal mining safety standards. The centerpiece was a hydraulic platform that could lift a mining cart full of evidence directly into the community center basement. The community center sat right above one of the main tunnel passages. And according to the building plans I'd obtained from the county, there was already a utility access panel in the basement floor that would be perfect for my purposes. Let me explain something about federal mining law that most people don't know. If you hold legitimate mineral rights, you can build whatever infrastructure you need to access those minerals, including transportation tunnels, equipment storage, and processing facilities. The mining law of 1872 gives mineral rights holders authority that supersedes almost every other type of property restriction. Translation: Miranda's HOA covenants couldn't touch me as long as I was conducting legitimate mining operations. While I worked on the tunnel system, I was building a legal case with help from people who understood how to take down environmental criminals. EPA criminal investigation agent Maria Santos had been tracking illegal toxic waste operations throughout Colorado. When I contacted her with photos of Miranda's dumping operation, she immediately opened a federal investigation. Agent Santos explained that environmental crimes like this fall under RICO statutes, the same laws used to prosecute organized crime families. What you've documented here isn't just environmental dumping, she told me during our first meeting. This is a systematic criminal enterprise involving bribery, fraud, theft, and environmental terrorism. If we can prove Miranda knew about the groundwater contamination risks, she's looking at 20 years minimum. My legal ally was environmental attorney Rebecca Jules, who specialized in Superfund cleanup cases. She helped me understand the financial implications of Miranda's crimes. Under federal environmental law, the people responsible for illegal dumping are personally liable for all cleanup costs, even if the contamination spreads to neighboring properties. Conservative estimate for cleaning up this level of contamination is $5 million, Rebecca explained. But if it reaches the municipal water supply, we're talking about $50 million or more. The financial forensics were handled by a certified fraud examiner named David Park. He traced Miranda's embezzlement of HOA funds through bank records, discovering that she'd been using homeowner dues to pay for everything from geological bribes to toxic waste disposal fees. She's been running a shell game with community finances for years, David reported. Every time residents questioned high maintenance costs, she'd create fake invoices and fraudulent contracts to justify the expenses. This is textbook white-collar crime. My timeline was built around the monthly HOA meeting scheduled for December 15th. Every homeowner would be there to discuss the road crisis and hear Miranda's latest demands for special assessments. It would also be the perfect venue for a public revelation with maximum witnesses. The evidence preparation took 2 weeks. I created a visual presentation showing the overlay between the 1950s geological surveys and Miranda's current development. Water samples from the contaminated underground stream were tested by an independent laboratory, confirming dangerous levels of heavy metals and carcinogens. The financial documents were organized chronologically to show the progression of Miranda's embezzlement scheme. Everything was loaded onto a mining cart that would travel through my tunnel system on a dedicated rail line, emerging through the hydraulic platform during Miranda's presentation. For security, I installed motion-activated cameras throughout the tunnel system, connected to a wireless network that automatically uploaded footage to cloud storage. If Miranda discovered my operation and tried to destroy evidence, every criminal act would be permanently documented. The final piece involved coordination with media and law enforcement. Channel 7 investigative reporter Lisa Park had been working on a series about HOA corruption in Colorado. When I contacted her with samples of my evidence, she immediately committed to covering the story. Sheriff's deputies and EPA agents would be positioned outside the community center during the meeting, ready to make arrests as soon as the evidence was presented. My family coordination was simple. Tyler and Mason would return from Denver the day before the meeting, ready to help present the evidence that would finally bring them home permanently. The night before the confrontation, I stood at the tunnel entrance testing the hydraulic platform one final time. 20 years underground had taught me that timing is everything in mining operations. You get one shot at blasting through solid rock. If you miscalculate, people die. Miranda, I said to the empty tunnel, you've been digging yourself into a hole for 15 years. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you just how deep it goes. Miranda must have suspected something, because 3 nights before the scheduled HOA meeting, she made a move that proved just how desperate she'd become. I was working late in the tunnel, installing the final connections for the hydraulic platform, when my motion sensors started screaming. The wireless alerts on my phone showed movement at 3 different tunnel entrances simultaneously. This wasn't some random trespasser. I grabbed my emergency radio and contacted Sarah. Lock the doors and call 911. Miranda's making a move. Through my security cameras, I watched a coordinated assault on my operation. Miranda herself was leading a team of 6 men, including 3 security guards and what looked like professional demolition workers. They were carrying mining explosives, the kind used for controlled rock blasting in construction projects. The plan was obvious: blow up my tunnels and bury the evidence of her crimes permanently. What Miranda didn't understand is that a guy who spent 20 years underground doesn't build tunnels without multiple escape routes and comprehensive security systems. As her team approached the main tunnel entrance, motion-activated floodlights illuminated the entire area like a football stadium. Automatic cameras began recording from 12 different angles, uploading everything to secure cloud storage in real time. But here's where Miranda made her biggest mistake. She decided to handle the explosives personally. I watched through the cameras as she placed dynamite charges at what she thought were structural weak points in my tunnel system. What she didn't realize is that I'd designed those tunnels using the same engineering principles we use in major mining operations. They're built to withstand seismic events and controlled blasting. The explosion, when it came, was spectacular. The blast echoed across the entire valley like thunder, shaking windows and houses 5 miles away. But instead of collapsing my tunnels, the explosion triggered something Miranda definitely didn't expect: a massive sinkhole that opened directly beneath her Mercedes G-Wagon. I watched from my security feed as that $80,000 vehicle disappeared into the earth like it was being swallowed by a hungry mountain. The sinkhole was perfectly round, about 15 feet across, and deep enough that I couldn't see the bottom even with floodlights. The ground collapse also did something else. It exposed Miranda's toxic waste barrels to the surface. 47 containers of hazardous chemicals were now visible to anyone driving past, lit up by the automatic floodlights and clearly marked with biohazard symbols. Sheriff's deputies arrived within 10 minutes, responding to reports of an explosion. What they found was Miranda Blackstone standing next to a massive sinkhole covered in rock dust, holding a detonator with enough evidence of environmental crimes scattered around her feet to fill a federal courthouse. The arrest was almost anticlimactic. Miranda tried to claim she was investigating suspicious tunneling activity, but it's hard to explain why you're carrying stolen mining explosives while standing next to a hole full of toxic waste barrels. Sheriff Bradley took one look at the scene and immediately called for FBI backup. Ms. Blackstone, you're under arrest for possession of stolen explosives, trespassing on federal mining claims, attempted destruction of property, and about 15 other things I haven't figured out yet. But here's the twist that made everything perfect. The explosion had been recorded by multiple security cameras, showing Miranda personally placing and detonating explosives on federal mining property. Federal law treats explosives theft and use as domestic terrorism, carrying a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years. The serial numbers on the dynamite traced back to a construction supply theft from her own development project 3 weeks earlier. So now she was facing federal charges for stealing explosives and using them in the commission of environmental crimes. By morning, the sinkhole had become a media sensation. News helicopters circled overhead, getting aerial footage of the Mercedes buried in the earth and toxic waste barrels scattered around the crater. Channel 7 ran the story as breaking news: HOA president's Mercedes swallowed by sinkhole during mysterious explosion. The explosion also solved another problem. It created the perfect excuse for me to expand my tunnel system for emergency geological assessment. The sheriff actually gave me permission to conduct underground surveys to determine if the area was safe for residents. Mr. McCready, given your mining expertise, could you evaluate whether this sinkhole represents a danger to the community? Sheriff, I'd be happy to conduct a comprehensive underground survey, for safety reasons, of course. That afternoon, while Miranda sat in county jail awaiting federal charges, I was legally exploring every tunnel passage beneath the HOA development, documenting the full extent of her criminal operation. The smell of sulfur from the exposed toxic chemicals mixed with dust from the explosion, creating an acrid cloud that hung over the development like a monument to Miranda's crimes. Homeowners walked around the sinkhole in stunned silence, staring at their HOA president's vehicle buried in the earth. When I called the boys that evening, Tyler asked, "Dad, did you really blow up Ms. Blackstone's car?" "No, son. She did that herself. I just happened to be filming when it happened." You'd think getting arrested for domestic terrorism would slow Miranda down, but federal bail hearings move fast when you've got expensive lawyers and political connections. Within 48 hours, she was back on the street, angrier and more desperate than ever. Her first move was to launch a massive legal counterattack designed to destroy me before I could present my evidence at the HOA meeting. At 6 a.m. on Thursday morning, county building inspectors arrived at my property with an emergency condemnation order. According to the paperwork, Miranda's lawyers had convinced a judge that my reckless tunneling operations had created a geological hazard zone that threatened the entire mountain community. "Mr. McCready, you've got 4 hours to evacuate the premises," the lead inspector announced. "This property is being seized pending a comprehensive safety evaluation." The evacuation order meant Sarah and I couldn't be on our own land, couldn't access our business equipment, and couldn't retrieve any of the evidence I'd gathered against Miranda. It was a brilliant legal maneuver. If I couldn't attend the HOA meeting because I'd been forced off my property, Miranda could control the narrative about the sinkhole and toxic waste discovery. But Miranda made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was keeping the evidence on my property. While her lawyers were getting restraining orders and emergency injunctions, I'd been working with EPA agent Santos to secure federal protection for all evidence related to the environmental crimes investigation. Every document, every photograph, every water sample was already in federal custody at the FBI field office in Denver. The county seizure couldn't touch federal evidence in an active criminal investigation. Miranda's second move was even more desperate. She attempted to bribe County Commissioner Jake Rodriguez to declare my mining claims invalid, offering him $50,000 cash to expedite the geological review process. What she didn't know was that Commissioner Rodriguez had been cooperating with the FBI corruption investigation for 3 weeks. He was wearing a recording device during their meeting. "Miranda, are you asking me to falsify federal mining records?" Rodriguez asked, speaking clearly for the benefit of the hidden microphone. "I'm asking you to do what's necessary to protect this community from a dangerous individual," Miranda replied. "Connor McCready is unstable, and his underground activities threaten everyone's safety." "And the $50,000? Consider it a consulting fee for your expertise in expediting bureaucratic processes." And that recording earned Miranda another federal charge, bribery of a public official, which carries up to 15 years in prison under the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. Her final desperate move was the most vicious. She tried to have my boys removed from their aunt's house by claiming I'd been making threatening phone calls and violating court orders. "Your Honor," her lawyer argued during an emergency custody hearing, "Mr. McCready has demonstrated a pattern of escalating violent behavior, culminating in the use of explosives near residential areas. These children are not safe in his custody." The judge was initially sympathetic, until Agent Santos entered the courtroom with video evidence showing that Miranda had been the one using explosives, and that I'd been the victim of her criminal assault. "Your Honor, the FBI has classified Ms. Blackstone as the primary suspect in a domestic terrorism investigation. Mr. McCready has been cooperating with federal law enforcement as a witness and victim." The custody case was dismissed immediately. By Friday afternoon, the day before the scheduled HOA meeting, Miranda was facing federal charges for environmental crimes, domestic terrorism, bribery of public officials, and attempted destruction of evidence. Her bail had been revoked, and she was sitting in federal detention awaiting arraignment. But here's where the story gets really interesting. Miranda's lawyers convinced a federal judge to allow her to attend the HOA meeting under armed federal escort, arguing that she had a constitutional right to defend herself against false accusations in a public forum. The judge agreed, apparently believing that public transparency was important in cases involving community corruption. So Saturday evening, December 15th, Miranda Blackstone would be sitting in the community center, flanked by federal marshals, watching me present evidence that would send her to prison for the next 20 years. The irony was perfect. She demanded the HOA meeting to discuss the crisis caused by my dangerous tunneling operation. Instead, she'd be attending her own criminal trial in the court of public opinion, with 200 witnesses and live television coverage. That Friday night, Sarah and I sat in a Denver hotel room, looking at photos of Tyler and Mason that my sister-in-law had sent. The boys were packed and ready to come home, just waiting for the all-clear from federal authorities. "Connor, what if something goes wrong tomorrow?" Sarah asked. I pulled out my father's brass compass and set it on the hotel room table between us. "Honey, I've spent 6 months building the most comprehensive criminal case in Colorado mining history. Tomorrow, Miranda gets to see what 20 years underground taught me about bringing down mountains." The community center had never seen a crowd like this. Every folding chair was occupied, with people standing along the walls and spilling out into the hallway. I counted at least 200 residents, plus county officials, EPA agents, FBI investigators, and enough news crews to cover a presidential debate. Miranda sat in the front row, handcuffed to a federal marshal, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made a stark contrast to her usual designer outfits. Her expensive lawyers flanked her on both sides, whispering frantically and shuffling through legal documents. HOA Vice President Robert Sterling called the meeting to order, his voice shaky with nervousness. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here tonight to address the recent geological incident and determine the future of our community's road access policies. Miranda's lead attorney stood up immediately. Your Honor, Mr. Sterling, my client wishes to address the false allegations that have been circulating regarding her community service. This isn't a courtroom, counselor, Sterling replied. This is a homeowners meeting. That's when Miranda made her final mistake. Despite her lawyer's advice, despite facing federal terrorism charges, despite being handcuffed to a U.S. Marshal, she demanded to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, rising from her chair as much as the handcuffs allowed, I've served this community faithfully for 3 years. The recent events have been orchestrated by Connor McCready, a disturbed individual who has used dangerous mining techniques to terrorize our neighborhood. She gestured toward the back of the room where Sarah and I were standing. Mr. McCready's reckless tunneling operation created the sinkhole that damaged my vehicle and exposed this community to unnecessary risks. The crowd murmured as Miranda continued her performance. I've dedicated my life to protecting property values and maintaining community standards. What we're witnessing is the revenge fantasy of a man who couldn't accept reasonable restrictions on his commercial operation. That's when I activated the hydraulic platform. The mechanical whir of motors started quietly, but grew louder as the platform rose from beneath the community center floor. People in the front rows looked around confused as the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once. Then the floor panel behind the podium began to rise. Miranda spun around just in time to see me emerging from the ground like a mining ghost, carrying a miner's lantern in one hand and pulling a loaded evidence cart with the other. Tyler and Mason rose behind me on the same platform, each carrying boxes of documents and pushing their own cart along the mining rails that were now visible through the floor opening. The crowd erupted in gasps and shocked murmurs. Cell phone cameras started flashing from every direction. Miranda, I said, setting the mining lantern on the podium so everyone could see my face clearly. You said I was digging my own grave. Turns out I was digging yours. She stood there with her mouth open, handcuffed and speechless, staring at the tunnel entrance that had just appeared in the middle of her community meeting. This is trespassing, her lawyer shouted. He can't be here. Actually, I replied, unfolding a set of official documents, I've been here longer than your development. Check the mineral rights from 1952. I walked to the large screen that Sterling had set up for the meeting and connected my laptop. The first image showed the original mining survey overlaid with the current HOA development. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're looking at is a map proving that this entire development was built on land classified as geologically unstable. Miranda knew this when she applied for building permits. The screen showed the 1950s geological reports warning about catastrophic ground instability and active landslide conditions. Tyler stepped forward with the first evidence box. These are the original mining company documents proving that the land was abandoned because it was too dangerous for construction. Mason presented the financial records. These bank statements show that Ms. Blackstone paid bribes to county officials to ignore the geological reports. But it was the environmental evidence that really shocked the crowd. I displayed photographs of the 47 toxic waste barrels, each clearly labeled with biohazard symbols. Miranda has been using our underground mine system as an illegal toxic waste dump. These chemicals have contaminated the groundwater that supplies drinking water to over 10,000 people in this valley. The crowd erupted in angry voices as people realized they'd been drinking contaminated water for years. EPA agent Santos stood up from her seat in the middle of the room. Ladies and gentlemen, the Environmental Protection Agency is announcing criminal charges against Miranda Blackstone for violations of the Clean Water Act, the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and the Comprehensive Environmental Response Act. She's facing over $1.7 million in fines and 20 years in federal prison. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward. Ms. Blackstone, you're under arrest for additional charges of environmental terrorism, bribery of public officials, theft of public funds, and conspiracy to commit environmental crimes. As the handcuffs clicked, Miranda looked directly at me. This isn't over, Connor. Yes, it is, Miranda. Some holes are too deep to climb out of. The aftermath moved faster than anyone expected. By Christmas morning, Miranda Blackstone was sitting in federal detention awaiting trial on 17 felony charges. Her development company was bankrupt, her assets frozen by federal authorities, and her entire criminal operation completely dismantled. The EPA designated the mine site as a federal Superfund location, triggering a comprehensive cleanup operation that would take 3 years and cost over $5 million. Every penny would come from Miranda's seized assets, including her house, her business properties, and her infamous Mercedes, which was eventually pulled from the sinkhole and auctioned to help pay for environmental remediation. Tyler and Mason came home 2 days before Christmas, just in time to help us restart our tree harvest. With Miranda's road restrictions permanently lifted by federal court order, customers started returning immediately. Sarah's phone rang constantly with families wanting to support the Christmas tree farmer who took down the corrupt HOA president. We sold every tree on the property. The financial settlement exceeded our wildest expectations. Federal court ordered $340,000 in restitution for the stolen HOA funds to be distributed among all affected homeowners. Our family received an additional $200,000 in environmental damages, plus guaranteed legal protection for our agricultural operation in perpetuity. But the real victory was watching our community heal. The HOA was formally dissolved by unanimous vote, replaced by a simple county-managed rural improvement district. Road maintenance became a county responsibility, funded by standard property taxes instead of arbitrary special assessments. No more Miranda-style corruption, no more selective enforcement of made-up rules. My tunnel system became the foundation for something I never expected, a model for responsible underground infrastructure development. The Colorado School of Mines sent graduate students to study my engineering techniques, particularly the integration of environmental monitoring with traditional mining methods. I established the Clearwater Foundation using part of our settlement money, providing free groundwater testing for rural communities throughout Colorado. The foundation's motto, printed on every test kit, reads, "When corporations bury environmental crimes, citizens have the tools to dig up justice." Every summer, Tyler and Mason run educational programs teaching local kids about geology, environmental science, and community activism. They've become minor celebrities at school, known as the kids who helped their dad defeat toxic waste dumping with mining engineering. The annual Mining Heritage Festival brings thousands of visitors to our mountain community each September. Families tour the tunnel system, now equipped with proper lighting and safety railings, learning about both historical mining operations and modern environmental protection. Miranda's final sentencing hearing took place 18 months later. Federal Judge Patricia Williams handed down the maximum penalty: 22 years in federal prison, $5 million in environmental fines, and permanent disbarment from any HOA or property management activities. "Ms. Blackstone," Judge Williams said, "you systematically poisoned an entire community's water supply for profit. You stole from your neighbors, bribed public officials, and attempted to destroy evidence using explosives. This court finds your crimes represent a profound betrayal of public trust." During victim impact statements, 43 homeowners testified about the financial and emotional damage Miranda's corruption had caused their families. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. "Your Honor, Miranda Blackstone tried to bury my family's livelihood. Instead, she buried herself under the weight of her own crimes. Justice has been served." Today, our Christmas tree farm is more successful than ever. Sarah has expanded into year-round nursery operations, and we're planning to pass the business to Tyler and Mason when they finish college. Both boys have been accepted to the Colorado School of Mines, with full scholarships from the Clearwater Foundation. The tunnel entrance beneath our property has been converted into a root cellar for storing harvested vegetables. The mining cart rails now transport organic produce instead of evidence of environmental crimes. But we've kept the original tunnel system intact, maintained and monitored as a reminder that sometimes the best way to solve problems is to dig deeper than your opponents expect. Before I close this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever dealt with HOA corruption or environmental crimes in your community? Drop a comment about your worst HOA nightmare. Connor's story proves that even the most powerful bullies can be brought down when ordinary people use their brains, their skills, and the law itself as weapons of justice. And if this story inspired you to believe that David can still beat Goliath, hit that subscribe button for more stories about regular folks taking down corrupt systems using determination, engineering skills, and sometimes heavy machinery. Next week, Karen tried to steal my parking spot for 6 months. She didn't expect my security camera to catch her insurance fraud ring.
Thanks for hanging out with us on HOA Stories, where the HOA Karens meet their match. If this story had you cheering or cringing, go ahead and like the video, drop a comment with your reaction, and hit subscribe so you're ready for the next wild HOA tale.